Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to the weekly live webinar presented by Affinity Federal Credit Union. My name is Oscar Cordova, and I am the External Affairs Specialist here at Affinity. I am in charge of the financial education efforts for the credit union for the areas that we serve. Today's topic is going to be vacation budgeting. So this is a great topic now that the summer is around the corner, and we may be thinking or planning to get away perhaps for the summer or the fall. So I'm going to be going over different tips and tricks on planning a vacation and how to manage our money to make sure that when we get back from the vacation, we're not faced with the harsh reality of not having enough in our budget to pay our other bills. So with that said, I am going to go over a quick disclaimer. The disclaimer states that the information provided to all of you this afternoon, it's for information purposes and educational purposes only. It's not intended to be actual legal, tax, or financial advice. If you guys need to talk to someone in regards of that matter, I'll be more than happy to put you in touch with someone. But just for the record, everything that I'm going to be showing you in this presentation is for information purposes only. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go over. I teach a topic called budgeting basics, which I talk about budgets, but that's not the topic for today. I am going to, though, go over briefly what a budget is for those of you that may not know what it is. I'm not going to spend too much time in explaining what a budget is. I'll just talk over a little bit, very briefly, on what parts of the budget and why is it important. And then towards the second half of the presentation, we'll go into the actual vacation tips and tricks that we should keep in mind. All right, so a budget is a spending plan, as many of you know, that controls your expenses. So the way you put together a budget is you want to find out how much you spend on a monthly basis and compare that amount to how much money comes in, how much money you earn. You want to do it on a monthly basis because most of our bills happen on a monthly basis. Rent, credit card payments, insurance, you name it. Most of our stuff happens on a monthly basis. So we want to compare those two amounts, the amount coming in and the amount going out, to make sure that we are within budget. Okay. Monitoring and tracking these expenses will actually lead to better control. Okay. So how do we budget this? How do we track these expenses? There's different ways. You can keep a notebook. You can take pictures of receipts, and that's highly encouraged, not only on vacation, but also here. When you buy anything, most of the times they give you a receipt. I don't want to say most of the time, perhaps all the time, they may give you a receipt. If you want to keep track of all of those expenses, just take a picture, snap a picture of the receipt, you can throw it out. And now you have a proof of what happened that day and how much money you spent. Create an Excel sheet for all of those people that are computer savvy. You can use apps to keep the budgeting and track the expenses. Apps such as Mint, Good Budget, Envelopes, and Why Not. Okay. All right. So a budget is one of the things that you got to consider keeping in a budget are different expenses, right? So there are fixed expenses and variable expenses, such as the same way that there in a mortgage, there's a fixed rate mortgage and a variable rate mortgage. So fixed expenses are expenses that do not change from month to month. And if they do change, they do it very subtly. There is no huge change or swings between the payments. And I've made a list here of those expenses from most important to least important. So housing and food is the most important. Utilities, of course, you want to have a roof over your head, but you want to be able to have some electricity, running water. Transportation, these expenses do not change too much because if you have a car payment, it's going to be the same every month. Or if you take mass transit, if you buy the monthly pass, that will be a fixed expense. Credit card payments or loan payments, child care, insurance payments. Short and long-term goals are also fixed because that's money that you put in a way to achieve something later down the line. And any additional recurring monthly expense such as subscriptions or memberships. Okay. Now, some of the variable expenses, these are the expenses that have changed, may change from one month to another, are expenses such as food. Well, it depends on how much you need. If you're one of those persons that goes month by month or week by week, utilities, of course, like cell phone and data, Wi-Fi, depending on how much you earn, you use. You may pay different amounts throughout different months. Transportation, again, car payments. If you're trying to get rid of the debt faster, you can send irregular payments on a monthly basis. You want to make sure that at least you send the minimum payment, but you can, budget wise, you can actually send a little bit more if you want to kind of like get out of that debt as quickly as possible. Mass transit, if you don't buy the monthly pass, then that expense is going to change month after month, depending on how much you use the train or the bus. Okay. Clothing and personal grooming. I haven't met the first person that spends exactly the same amount month after month on these items: clothing and personal grooming. Gas, parking lots, and tolls. Gas is going up nowadays. So a month ago, where I was able to fill my tank with $40, now I'm doing it with 65. And so those are expenses that may change, and you have to keep in mind for budget wise. Medical bills, recreational activities, and entertainment. Okay. This is the last slide that I'm going to be going over on budgets, and then we'll go into the vacation tips and tricks that have to do with budgets. So an emergency fund. So an emergency fund is always good to have. If you have a budget in place already, you guys want to be able, or want to, as much as possible, save towards an emergency fund. An emergency fund covers unexpected surprises, emergencies. And on vacation, when we go on vacation, it's always good to have something like this set up where you can actually, the money is liquid. That means that it's easily accessible in case of an emergency. Just like we could be at home and have an emergency, we can definitely have an emergency abroad or on vacation. And it'll be a little bit harder when we have it on vacation because we're not used to our environment. We may be at a place where we don't know where things are, a hospital or a pharmacy or anything like that. So it makes it a little bit more challenging to have an emergency while on vacation. So having an emergency fund is going to go a long way, because whatever money you have there, if it doesn't cover the whole emergency, it will definitely help. Okay. So as you guys can see here in the slide, these are some of the reasons why you would set up an emergency fund. The way you set it up is, once you pay everything off during the month, whatever money is left over should be going towards your long-term, short-term, or emergency fund accounts. And of course, that's only if you can. What's important here is the behavior and not so much the amount. Whatever you can save towards these purposes is going to help you down the road. Now, let's go now and talk about a vacation. So when you plan a vacation, what is your starting budget? And you have to be real with yourself. You cannot say, you know what, I'm going to go to Florida next month and I want to spend $3,000, where your budget, it's only allowing you to spend 700, for example. So what's going to be your starting budget? If you are planning to spend a little bit more of what your budget allows on a monthly basis, then now is the time to start saving towards that vacation, right? So if you haven't saved a lot of money for vacation and you're just going off without having any savings, we gotta sit down and you're gonna make sure that all of your bills are paid, and what money you're gonna have left over for that. That's gonna be your budget for your trip. If you've saved up, now you have some of the money in the savings account, and now you can say, okay, my budget for this trip is X amount. You want to choose your vacation destination, of course, and if it depends on where you're gonna go. It's different if you're gonna go within the continental United States or if you're going abroad like Europe or South America. Because there's a couple of things that you have to take into consideration, which is currency exchange and other fees and expenses that you may not be thinking of, but they're there, okay? Also, you want to think about how many people are going to be on this vacation. Is it just going to be your wife, your husband, or you, or are you going to be taking the kids? And this knowing how many people are going to go on vacation will help you plan better for the expenses that you're going to be incurring in the trip. Dates of the trip. So this is also very important. During the summer, when the kids are off school, everything goes up, starting with the plane tickets to hotels, because this is the time where families want to go out because, of course, the kids are out of school. So you have to plan those dates. If you plan the dates while the kids are going to school or during those months, or if you don't have any kids, then planning a trip in February or March, you'll get better prices and better plane tickets. After September, you'll also plane fare will decrease because kids will be back in school. So and when you're planning the dates, you want to plan how many days and nights are you going to be there. What kind of trip are you taking? A plane, car, or boat? You know, so I'm going to be going over a couple of tips when booking or planning a plane vacation or a cruise. But this is also, you have to take into account what kind of trip is going to be. If it's a car and you're driving somewhere, you have to account for gas and tolls. So all of those little expenses, you need to make sure you understand that they're there and that you have enough money to cover all of them. And also characteristics of typical weather or where you're going. So if you last year I went down to Peru, and down in Peru, South America, you may think it's tropical and it's hot. Well, there are parts in Peru that are hot, and I didn't think about bringing jackets. And there are places in Peru where you definitely need warmer climate clothing. So you have to get acquainted on the climate of where you're going to be going. If you already own the items, it's great, but if you don't, you need to budget to buy some of those items. So some of the clothing that you may need to go there. All right, very good. So when you plan, also you want to plan for food on a daily basis, and that accounts for restaurants and eating out. Now, if you're going to one of those all-inclusive resorts, this may not be as important unless you're planning to leave the resort and go out and eat outside of the resort. But all of those all-inclusives, is pretty much included in the fare. So you don't have to worry about food or anything like that. Again, hotel and lodging expenses. So it depends on if you're doing an all-inclusive resort or you're just going to a hotel. Rental and transportation. This is very important, and I actually fell for this one because in one of the trips that I took a long time ago, about I want to say 5 years ago, I did not plan for the transportation from the airport to the hotel. And that was money that I had to pay on the spot, because now you're at the airport and you're thinking, okay, I can just grab a taxi. Depending on where you go, that may not be an option. So you want to be able to plan your transportation from the airport to the hotel or the resort and back. Or if you're renting a vehicle, make sure that you shop around. Don't just go don't try to book something when you get there. Try to have a reservation ahead of time and shop around different rental companies to get the best deal. Once there, something else is excursion and activity. So if you are in the tropical or the Caribbean, there are many hundreds of different excursional activities depending on your destination. So if you are somebody that would like to leave the resort and do some kayaking or some I don't know, um, parachuting or buggies, or there's different things out there, you have to account for those expenses as well. Now, once there, the hotel may, or not may, they will definitely try to sell you all of these excursional activities from the hotel, and you'll end up paying a little more than if you were to plan all of these excursions ahead of time. Or even by leaving the resort and trying to do it at the center of town or the city. Now, it depends on where you go. That may not be an option, but just letting you know that not that what the hotel offers is not always the best that there is. You may be able to get the same excursion or the same experience for less if you plan ahead, or if you're able to leave the resort and go to the local city or town and try to like find out about those excursions there. Okay. And lastly, tips. So tips, some resorts I've gone in Dominican Republic and Mexico, they're not allowed. So the employees there are not allowed to receive tips, and if they're seen receiving tips, their employment may be in jeopardy. And that depends on how exclusive the resort is. But there's other ones, I've been in other ones where tipping is encouraged. So if you see that you're happy with the employees service, tipping is not a frown upon, and you have to account for those tips as well. So those expenses. With air travel, flights with one-stop versus non-stop flights, if you are traveling and you don't mind the layover or the time spent with a one-stop flight, you may get a flight a little cheaper than non-stop flights, but that will you may get the flight cheaper, but the alternative is the fact that you have to wait at an airport for a couple of hours in a layover. So it depends on what kind of time are you playing with. I'm planning a trip to Greece, and it's about a 9.5-hour flight. So with that, I'm trying to convince my spouse, my wife, to let's go one nonstop. But she's kind of like, I want to be able to stop because it's just too long of a flight, and that's everybody's preference. So we'll see how that turns out, but understand that you may get a little cheaper flight with a one stop, but you'll be paying that whatever you're saving in time. Okay. Don't wait until the last minute to shop. This increases the chance to overpay. So the farther out you plan your air travel, the better. Okay. Consider alternatives for departing airports such as JFK and LaGuardia. So if you live in New York and you're kind of like halfway between the two airports, shop around in both airports just to find out where is the cheapest flight going out. Make use of travel websites such as Kayak, Expedia, Hotwire to compare prices. Now, many of these sites may use the same search engine. So it has happened that when I've gone to Expedia and I look for a flight, and then I go to Hotwire, I get the exact prices, kind of like they're using the same search engine. But Kayak is different. So look around different websites out there. Priceline is another one where you can actually compare different website with different airlines fares. Not all websites will have every airline there. So different websites will have different airlines. Okay. And of course, you use your frequent flyer miles. That's why you're part of these programs, to earn miles so you can use them for purposes such as going on vacation. So if you have some miles saved up, use them. Depending, the only thing with frequent flyer miles is that, for example, if I have United miles accumulated, I can only fly United. So it doesn't allow me to change Well, you know what? Perhaps you will be able to. You will have to just find out because some airlines are part of like an alliance, and sometimes you can use a miles for one airline to be used on another airline if they're part of the same alliance. But that's kind of like the fine print. You will need to find out through your airline if you can do that. Okay. With cruise planning, it's a little different. So you want to collect cruise brochures from local travel agencies or look online. BJ's and Costco has great programs for cruises and vacations. So you want to gather these brochures so you can actually compare destinations and what's included in the cruise. You want to decide on prices and compare different cruise lines that have similar stops. Okay. Determine the duration. So 3 days versus 14 days. And also the fact your personal preference. So if you are okay staying 2 weeks in a ship, then that perhaps is a cruise that you wanna book. I wouldn't be able to. I like to go out and do stuff. Not that you don't do anything on a cruise. There's a lot to do on a cruise. But I think the most that I'll be able to be on a cruise will probably 5 to 6 days. But that's just personal preference, of course. You want to book your trip early and take advantage of sales. And when I mean early is, I believe with cruises, you can book up to a year in advance. So the earlier you start planning for this, the better. And you want to monitor your credit card provided for the cruise. So with cruises, you don't have cash. You don't pay cash for anything. You provide a credit card ahead of time and they'll give you a wristband. And then you're gonna be able to just pay different stuff on board of the ship with your wristband, but that can easily get out of hand real quick. So you want to monitor your credit card whenever possible. If the boat has Wi-Fi, or if you get to a port where you can actually hook up to your Wi-Fi, you want to keep on always checking your credit card balances to make sure that you don't get a surprise when you get off the boat. Become familiar with the exchange rate, and this is when you go abroad. So usually when you travel to another country, the best exchange rate for the local currency will not be at home here when you can order money. It'll usually be there at a local bank or ATM. You want to exchange the total amount of money you're planning to spend to avoid multiple transactions. Every time you do a transaction, there may be different fees that are assessed. An exchange fee, an out-of-network fee, if you use an ATM. So as much as possible, try to find out what is the total that you're going to be spending, and try to use it, take out the money at once. Okay. You want to call the bank and credit cards ahead of time to find out about the foreign exchange fees, and not a lot of people see that on the credit card disclosure or the terms and conditions, but it's always good to know what those exchange fees and percentages are prior to leaving the country. Okay, that way you can choose what will be the best card for you to use for this trip. And lastly, you want to add travel notices to your cards to avoid freezes. If you don't call the institution, the banking institution, your bank, your credit union, if you don't call them ahead of time and let them know that you're going to be out of the country, when you attempt to use that card, that transaction will be flagged as possible fraud because the bank doesn't know where you are. And if you don't let them know ahead of time, that means that you may have been a victim of identity theft and somebody out of the country trying to use your card. So they'll go ahead and freeze it, and they'll try to contact you. But if you're out of the country, it may be, if not hard, it may be almost impossible to get a hold of you to make sure that is you who's using it. So please, if you're going to be leaving the country, call the credit card companies or your bank or your credit union. Let them know that you're going to be out of the country from such date to such date. That way they know. Okay. Lastly, when you're coming back, you want to, what the money that you're going to be spending on gifts for family members and friends, you want to control the number of gifts purchased for friends and family. Okay, you want to control the number. You want to make a list of people that you want to buy, and perhaps you want to assign a certain amount per person. So you want to determine how much money you want to spend per person. Because if you have a long list, this amount of money could be get out of hand fairly quickly, you know. So when you go to different countries or different isles in the Caribbean, you have a long list, you can definitely negotiate discounts with the locals, or buy in bulk, you know, buying a large amount of keychains or whatever you guys want to bring, to thinking about the expense that you're going to be incurring in all of these gifts. So I'm sure that anybody that receives a gift from you in your next vacation is going to be grateful that you thought about them and you brought something back. You also have to think about your own budget and make sure that you don't overspend in all of these gifts or items that you want to buy for family members. Okay. Lastly, you want to have fun. We work very hard for our money, and if we're taking the time to plan a vacation out, you want to make sure that you have fun. And all of these different tips and budgeting tips that I'm giving you guys is to make sure that you guys enjoy your time there and not be worried about money, and not be worried about the fact that when you get back to the States or back to your normal life, now you're going to be buried in debt because you're going to be paying for that vacation. Okay. So with that said, this concludes my presentation this afternoon. At this point, I would like to open up the floor for any questions that any one of you may have. Just while you guys type those questions, just wanted to let you guys know that this webinar is being recorded, and I will be sending the link to rewatch this webinar this afternoon. So you guys can rewatch it, share it with friends and family, okay? And also, next week's presentation, I believe, is going to be on credit card, credit report alerts. So I'm gonna be teaching the audience how to put an alert on a credit report if you suspect that you have been a victim of identity theft. So very interesting topic. I hope to see everybody, all of you, next week in our next installment of the weekly webinar. So with that said, let me just take a look at the chat or the Q&A option. I do not see any questions at this moment. Very good. So at this point, I would like to bring this webinar to a close. I want to thank everybody for attending. I think this was great. Hold on a second. There is, okay, not the, yes, so thank you. Thank you so much as well to you for attending. And so I would like to bring this to a close. Again, look out for my email later on today with the link to rewatch it if you guys want to. I hope you guys enjoy your vacations as you guys are planning them out, and take note of all of these tips that I gave you guys. That way you guys can properly manage your cash and your expenses as you guys go away. Okay, so thank you so much once again. Have a wonderful afternoon. Hope to see you guys next week. Bye-bye.